Hey friends, so I'm excited today to tell you that I finished this series. I have a lot that are currently running that I've started the first book and just never picking up the rest. So I think this year I'm really going to dedicate myself to trying to finish the series. I already had a book buying haul where I bought a lot of my favorites and they were like second and thirds and fourths in series. So I think I'm just going to follow that trend through. So hopefully this won't be the only one I finished, but it is the first one I finished this year. And so A Conjuring of Light by V.E Schwab is the third in the Shades of Magic series. With it being the third, it's kind of hard to give a completely spoiler-free overview, so this is going to be very vague, but I want to make sure it's spoiler-free. So in the second book, evil was kind of growing and hadn't really come to face our merry band of Lila, Kel, Alucard, and Prince Kai, but in this book they're met with it face on and have to figure out how to overcome it for the good of the kingdom and for the ones that they love. Alright, so as the series has progressed, so has the difficulty with multiple points of view. In the first one, I think we only followed Lila and Kel, and there were like one or two other perspectives thrown in. The second book brought on board a few more, and this one has a lot. We follow, of course, the main four, but we also get views into several other people's point of view. The chapters don't start with saying who it's focusing on, but each character is in a very different scenario. So because of how it's written, it's pretty easy to figure out which character we're following. But with how many characters we're following from their point of view and like being privy to their thoughts, that could get a little confusing. So this might be on the medium to more intermediate scale of difficulty when it comes to juggling points of view. So we don't see any new morality examined throughout this book. It examines a kind of theme that I've seen a lot in YA literature, which is a giving up of yourself or your comfort for something bigger than yourself or for somebody else. And while it's not entirely new or new in the genre, this book delves into it a lot deeper. We follow a lot of different people, and they all seem to come to a point where they have to give something of themselves up for something greater. It can sometimes be as small seeming as a pocket watch, but it can also scale up to giving someone's life. So I think that since it goes a lot more in depth and we see quite a few people struggle with it, that might be better for a more intermediate level reader as opposed to a fresh new reader. So another thing that's ramped up with this series is the romance. Not only is it being talked about a little bit more, we've seen a few new romances, and there's been a little bit more time in the story or higher stakes to push people to like admit that kind of stuff and talk about that kind of stuff. But again, because of these perhaps deepening relationships, it also gets a little more intimate. Nothing more explicit than like a kiss and bodies held close is literally described in the book, but it makes it very clear that that's not where things stop. Just a really big hug. It's not the focus of the book, though. I think I'm just going to stick with my running theme of intermediate. It's not that frequent, but it does get more intimate, so you wouldn't probably want somebody super young reading that part. So just make sure you're aware of that before you decide to pick it up or recommend it to somebody. So this is a section I would say is definitely on the way more mature side as opposed to being ready for any young reader. There's a lot of violence. The whole series has been building up to this book and this big conflict in the book. And yeah, I think every character is trained with either a blade or magic or both. And on top of that, Antari can use blood in order to do magic more easily or make it more potent or something. And so we see lots of different flavors of violence, from a voluntary bleeding of yourself for a purpose to somebody being run through with swords. So while Schwab never focuses on like gruesome details or anything, there's still a pretty copious amount of blood being shed throughout this book. So I love this series so dearly. I don't want to spend too long going off on all the things I love about it, but I think if I had to pick one thing that I really enjoy about this book is just the characters. I thought it was kind of funny. I was talking about how I felt at the end of the book to my mom the other day, and I kind of described the characters to her as like, these two I feel are my friends, and I've been made to care about them a lot as individuals. And these other people, I love them, but not as my friends, but as like friends of my friends. I think that that's a very interesting and more diverse way to be able to write a book. Like, I think it's almost important that you don't love every character equally, because you're not ever going to love every person that you meet equally. You probably have lots of friends and you love different things about different ones, and maybe some you've known for longer or have had more harrowed experiences with. So your love for them runs a little deeper. Or, same with family versus friends. You might love them a little deeper than you love friends. And so I think that was really interesting. I don't know if she intended to write the characters that way, or if that was just me as a reader, but I definitely appreciated it either way. The other thing I liked about the characters is that they all have a redeemable characteristic. Even Holland, for example, he's teamed up with the bad guys that are definitely the bad guys in the first book, and then, he kind of becomes more amenable to Kel throughout the series. But even though you're not really supposed to like him, and he's gruff, he's kind of rude towards our friend characters, he still has some redeemable qualities, and I really like that. And almost kind of the same for the king and queen. Not so much that we were never meant not to like them, but in at least the very first book, we were supposed to really side with Kel and Delilah. And so since the king and queen are in this weird relationship with Kel of that he's same age as their son, he probably fits better into a ward status than either a son or a bodyguard. He's always felt weirdly in and weirdly out all at the same time. And it's easy when you first read about him and read about that relationship to be like, well, that's on the king and queen then. They should have done more to make him feel at home. He's a wee baby. He needs somebody. But in this book, we kind of see more into the thought process of both the king and the queen and kind of why they've done what they've done and how it could seem on the outside to be uncaring, rude, whatever. But we kind of see the reasons for doing that. And I really appreciated insight into the king before he goes out and before he unveils his last-ditch effort final blow to the big bad guy. I think that it made him more human and more believable. And I think the part that kept me reading and the part that kind of made me feel frustration on the behalf of the characters is that this big baddie is so big and bad that it feels like there's no way to win. And it's really hard to think of something to do when all you can think of is all the ways that you can't win. But anyway, on that chipper note, like I said, the characters have been my favorite thing throughout the whole series, but I really love the world building, the way that Schwab unravels the plot. I just think there are a lot of really redeemable things throughout this whole series. So in summary, my take on the book, and probably the whole series, that'd be a kind of nice thing to do every time I finish a whole series, to kind of re-rate the whole thing. Because I've definitely see a trend of the first book starting off a little bit more amenable to all audiences, and it kind of lures you in. And then once you get towards the end of the series, sometimes it can get more difficult to read. Sometimes it can get more violent or more intimate. So this book does definitely do a bit of that ramping up. I would say that the first book, I think I even did a review like this, but when I was doing my written reviews only, which are my Squarespace, check it out. It started off a lot more new reader friendly. You only really followed 2 characters with maybe a very small handful of other narrations thrown in. They're always done in the same style though, so it should be easy, but it's still a little bit of flavor in there for you. And same thing with violence and romance. Both were, romance definitely was such a small thing in that book. In fact, I don't think anything romantic happened in that book at all. But now we get to this book where things are a lot more violent. They're fighting almost constantly. There's a lot of blood. And we're following a lot more characters. We've pulled a lot more narrators into the mix. So I would say that if you're going to share this book with a new reader, you would want to pace it out or wait until they're a little later, just because the last book is, in my opinion, quite mature. So I would say you'd probably want to wait until somebody's at least a teenager before showing them this book. Even though I think you could read the first book quite a bit earlier, I think it might be better to wait a bit since the whole series is out and you could read it all back to back, and they might want to save that introduction for a little later in somebody's reading journey. But that's my review. I like this book a lot, and I would probably recommend it to most readers who enjoy fantasy. I think it can have enough big brain things to entertain more mature audiences. And again, except for sometimes this last book here, I think that it can definitely welcome in even younger readers. And it just does a really good job of capturing the imagination. So I hope that you consider reading this series if you haven't read it yet already. And I want to thank you so much for watching my video today. Your support really means a lot. I hope you enjoy your day and that I get to see you in the next one. Bye for now.